All right, folks, welcome back to the Roswell UFO Symposium. I am your host, Mike. We have co-host Shane, co-host Toby, and we have a special guest today, Keith Arem. Keith is the creative director at PCB Productions. He is also the director of the Roswell Incident, as well as many other creative endeavors. And we'll look forward to talking with him in a second. You can click on the link at the bottom, which has the link to his stuff. He is also on Twitter at Keith Arem. And if you want to support us, all you have to do is go down below, click the link tree for the Roswell UFO Symposium. And we've got tons of stuff on there from all of our social media stuff. You can leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify. And we do video episodes, and they're on Spotify. Also, if you're listening on an audio platform, please follow us on YouTube and subscribe. And if you are basically, watching on YouTube right now, which some of you are, please check us out on all the audio platforms. But without further ado, welcome on the show, Keith. How are you?
Really good. Thanks for having me.
Director of the Phoenix Incident.
Welcome, Keith.
How you guys doing?
Good. And if anybody's interested, you can watch the Roswell Incident on Toby. I just watched
the Phoenix Incident.
The Phoenix. What did I say?
You keep saying Roswell.
Roswell. I apologize. My brain's getting missed up.
Equally cool.
But yeah, the Phoenix Incident. I'm sorry. I did watch it on Tubi. It's kind of an interesting thing. You took like a real incident and kind of used that as a platform or a springboard to come up with this cool story based off of that. So, what was that the plan from the beginning, or how did you get going with that project?
Yeah, I've been working in video games and graphic novels for a number of years, and this was going to be sort of my entry, kind of my student project to kind of get into directing motion pictures. And we had a pretty limited budget for doing the motion picture. So we wanted to do something that was sort of part documentary, part found footage, something that, could kind of work within the budget range of what our finances could afford to do. So we kind of did it as like what we consider like a docu-thriller. And it was all research. It was all based on real events that took place back in the 90s. And we combined all the news footage and recovered footage, plus the stuff that we shot, all into this sort of unique kind of mockumentary to put it together. And most of it is all actually based on real facts and footage. And then we fictionalized our story and our characters going through the middle of all these crazy events that were happening in 1997.
Could you explain a little bit about the crazy marketing campaign you guys did? Because I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, one of the things that made the film kind of unique was that we had done so much research and so much development on the story that it wouldn't just fit into an hour and a half motion picture. So we actually shot about 4 hours of footage that was produced footage, probably hundreds of hours of footage we shot. And then we created sort of like an ARG, like an alternate reality game scavenger hunt, where we created this sort of multimedia experience with hidden websites, social media characters, live actors, and different sort of interactive elements that's there. And we created the backstory for all of our characters in the movie and hid it all over the world, all over the internet, and live events, things at Comic-Con and Roswell. We did a lot of different appearances. And there's all these like Easter eggs and what we call like rabbit holes that would pull people into this alternate reality game. And it ended up generating about 20 million followers for the production that was there. And you would basically get the backstory and all the materials that would lead into the movie. So if you saw the film, you would be like, wait a second, I heard about this. And if you could Google anything, you would find the characters and find things online. So it would look like everything was real. So the characters had their own family histories. There were missing person sites. There was news reports. There was military articles. And we partnered up with about 20 or 30 different companies that helped us hide the footage and put things together. And so when we launched the movie, we launched at the International UFO Congress in Phoenix. And then we did a national premiere with Fathom Events and AMC, Regal, and Cinemark theaters. And we streamed that into about 200 cities. So as an independent film for $1 million movie, it was kind of a special thing because most movies don't usually kind of launch that way.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I thought it was well put together. Like you said, it's kind of a interesting, unique way of making a film. What's your connection or thoughts on the actual Phoenix Lights or the Phoenix incident?
Well, what was wild was that year in '97, all over the world, but especially in Arizona, there was just so many unique things that were happening. There had already been the Belgian wave that had happened in Europe, and there was all these other triangular craft sightings that were going on. There was this unbelievable rise in unexplained cattle deaths, and there was this rise in disappearances in Arizona. And Arizona already has a pretty migrant kind of population outside of the cities, but the number of missing persons really started to escalate right around that time. And the Hale-Bopp comet was also coming to its closest point to the Earth in 7,500 years. So there was a lot of things that were all kind of coalescing at the same time and coming together and converging. And the Heaven's Gate cult had previously been based in Phoenix, Arizona, and before they moved to Rancho Santa Fe, which is about 400 or 500 miles away near San Diego. And when they saw the Hale-Bopp comet footage that was coming in, there was sort of a triangular or some kind of a shadow that was trailing behind the comet. And people didn't know what it was, if it was ice formations or something, but they believed it was a ship that was coming to sort of evacuate and take their group to the next level of consciousness. And so that week that all of this was coming together, this massive fleet of lights was seen from the Nevada border all the way down through Flagstaff and Prescott and all the way down to Phoenix, Arizona, and crossed over parts of the city. And there were reports that there were jets scrambled and all of this eyewitness footage that took place and early video cameras that were there in the 90s. And so this was one of the largest mass sightings that had taken place, and it was all happening around the same time in March of 97. So we kind of felt that that was the best backdrop to sort of weave our characters through and connect all of those different things between the Heaven's Gate cult and the Hale-Bopp comet and the Phoenix Lights and what was happening around the state. And so it kind of wrote itself in a lot of ways, and it was pretty cool. There was 2 other motion pictures that came out right afterwards that actually kind of borrowed a lot of elements and some visual elements as well, which was kind of interesting. But we shot a documentary afterwards. We brought in Nick Pope and Lee Spiegel and Alejandro Rojas and Stanton Friedman when he was still alive. And we did a little documentary kind of talking about the fact and fiction of the movie. Even though the film was obviously had a lot of fictional elements, we kind of talked about all those real elements that were incorporated.
Can I point out real quick to anyone that's listening, it's kind of similar to what Tom DeLonge's done with his books, reality with a story to kind of tell a really interesting story to kind of get a message out. Am I kind of describing it right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of people, they learn history through, a narrative. They learn through stories, and they if you look at Titanic, one of the top grossing motion pictures of all time, all those characters were fictionalized, but they were based and inspired by real characters that were in that. And so you have a historical event that takes place, and then you identify with those characters and the story that goes there, and it kind of humanizes history to some extent. And I think that because UFOs and UAPs and the kind of world of that we live in terms of doing the research and finding things, a lot of people have a hard time relating to that. And so, and at that time, especially when we made the movie, a lot of the Pentagon footage and a lot of the other Tic Tac footage and other things hadn't been released yet. And we were seeing stuff privately, but it wasn't really mainstream at that point. So a lot of the military footage, the FLIR photography, a lot of things that we had was really getting a lot of traction, and that's why our viral campaign, I think, took off so much, because people, really saw this as military footage that was being leaked out. So when all that Tic Tac footage and everything else did come out, people thought it was the next part of our movie or some part of the extension of the viral campaign, and the film had a huge uptick on Apple and on Amazon.
I want to piggyback on that though too. I think that's important, like using new media formats such as like a mixed documentary type fantasy to tell this story, or perhaps, to beat Toby, comic books. I know, for example, there's a very talented guy, Estimate of Situation. I got one of his comics, so I know you deal with comics too. So he's telling this story here, and I always talk about this in my spaces or on this podcast. Like, using new media formats and mixing them, doing what you need to do to bring people into the topic is super important to me as an experiencer. So I appreciate what you do. And I also know, can you talk a little bit about the comic portion of what you do?
Yeah, to me, comic books are such a phenomenal format for a creator or a writer or an artist to express themselves, because you don't need a giant team of people to be able to convey your story and tell sort of a bigger message. And so I started about 15, 20 years ago with my early books, just started to write comics as graphic novels to be able to storyboard these ideas or these movies. And the first book I did was a book called Ascend, and that became the top selling book for Image Comics, and is still actually, has film offers, and it's started my directing career and a lot of work in games. And so now I've got a new graphic novel that's in production right now with Wesley Snipes and Adam Lawson called The Exiled. And sort of the alien tie-in to that is going to be revealed in the second episode that's going to be coming out. That book's just coming out next month. And it's great because working in graphic novels and comic books, you really get to explore these ideas and these characters. And like you said, it's a great way for people who might not follow other things. They might not always get to see motion pictures or documentaries or listen to podcasts. It's just everyone finds their own, entertainment or stories that they relate to. And if they find that information coming in from a comic book or a graphic novel, it's a great way to introduce people to the topic.
Also, real quick before I finish, I'd like to shout out, man, the comic book thing impresses me more than anything. That kind of saved my life at a tough time, right? I'm such a nerd, and shout out all the nerds. I got encyclopedias going on, and again, I spend a lot of time in it. It's a great way to get different messages out. So I appreciate that, man. I'm a super nerd, so I love it.
Super nerd.
Yeah, I think everyone responds to different things. Some people love just a novel. Some people like the visual side of things. Some people want a linear experience like a movie or a TV show. Some people want an interactive side of things. So you see some people get hooked in through games because they just like the tactile version of being able to interact with something and telling the story themselves. Even a graphic novel, if you think about it, is fairly interactive. I mean, the story doesn't progress unless you turn the page and you're reading it in sort of your own voice or how you're interpreting that story. So it's interesting that that graphic novels and comic books have continued to inspire so many different formats and so many different shows. Half the movies and TV shows are still influenced by graphic novels and comic books, not just Marvel and DC, but other stories as well. And it's such a great medium to work in that people can get started that way and then evolve that into these other formats.
Yeah, I have a huge digital collection, image included.
Can you guide us a little bit through what you do in the video game world?
So I started I was influenced by a lot of things. I was an artist. I was a writer. I was interested in movie special effects, but I had a big background in music. And so I originally started with the band Biohazard and then Contagion on Capitol Records. And so when I came out to California, I was coming out here to go to school, and then I got signed with Capitol Records. And so I was touring and playing with Nine Inch Nails and Frontline Assembly, a lot of these early industrial bands. And I got sucked into scoring motion pictures and movies, and had scored about 7 movies. But the whole time we're on tour, we're playing video games. We were playing StreetFighter on our tour buses and going around and doing things. And so I had a friend at Sony, and he asked if I was interested in getting involved in the game industry. And I thought I had heard about that there were these guys getting paid to play video games. And I was like, sounds like a cool thing. He said, wait a second, you have a bachelor's degree in audio engineering and you're a recording artist on Capitol Records and you're scoring motion pictures and you want to be a game tester? I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. And he goes, you need to be in production. And so he introduced me to a team up here in Los Angeles that was working on Battletech, which was the first Mech Warrior game on the early Sega systems, and did the score for that, and it blew up. And then I ended up working on Earthworm Jim and a whole bunch of stuff, and I got hired by Virgin Interactive, and then I ended up just getting pulled into the video game industry in the 90s, and then we were bought by Electronic Arts. I was the audio director for Virgin and EA for about 7 years. And then I started PCB Productions in 2000, and this is now 23 years, and we're going strong and got our own movies now and our own books and our own video games. And so it's been just a wild ride, and just kind of, you don't know where you're going to go. I still wonder what I'm going to be when I grow up, but it's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned off air too, love Call of Duty, and a lot of the other stuff that you've been associated with. As far as like scoring, we're working on our first documentary right now. Do you have any advice for people looking to get into that creative side of things with like the audio aspects of it and everything like that? Like, is it just because you're passionate about it, and like when you start a project, you're just so into it that you come up with something, or do you have an idea going in of what you want to do, or like what's that process like?
I mean, as a composer, it's kind of an interesting difference from where I'm at now as a director, but having a musical background really influenced all the other aspects of my creative work that I do. I think for me as a composer, I would wake up with an idea at like 3 or 4 in the morning and want to sort of like explore that and be able to pull that in. And I think that you need to kind of allow your creative environment to be able to do that, to be able to support, what you want to create and, where you want to go as a job, and be able to do that as a career. It's much different because you have work in front of you, and hired as a composer to be able to, score a motion picture or a TV show. You're now interfacing with other creatives that have their idea of where that's going to be. And so I think, if it's your own work, it's one thing because you're kind of following your own creative whims. But if you're actually brought in by another client, you're trying to understand and relate to them and pull that together.
Thanks. Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned, you were into industrial kind of music and stuff like that. Do you think that served you too? Because that seems like that would go hand in hand with actually a lot of the types of games that you've been associated with, that style of music. Like me personally, I'm into jam bands, improv, that kind of stuff. But I could see where industrial rock, industrial music, like you mentioned, 9 Inch Nails and all that kind of stuff. I think that kind of, like I said, goes hand in hand with those style of games.
Yeah, it was interesting is that when I started scoring for games, the industrial music was like perfect for it, and it kind of led into other forms of electronic music. So I was doing Ridge Racer and stuff for Tony Hawk, and a game called Metal Arms, and a lot of games like that. But then that also led into this orchestral, very heavy stuff that we did for a lot of other games that was tied in with more of my cinematic stuff I was doing for films. One of the things that was really tragic for me, and it kind of changed my career, was that I was writing a lot of music. I was also creating samples and doing sound design because I was doing all the sound for like Tony Hawk and all those other games, creating all the skateboard sounds and ollies and everything else for all the sort of character sounds and in-game sounds.
Did you work hand in hand with Mick West?
No, not for the sound design.
I was joking. No. Because he helped design Tony Hawk.
I knew you were going to say that, Mike. I knew it.
But in 2008, 2009, we had a huge fire here at our studios, and it broke out in our music vault where our music room was and all of our hard drives, and it just wiped us out. Lost like almost 50,000 samples and about 1,000 of our multi-tracks and all of our equipment, and burned, all of that. And then the rest of the studios were smoke destroyed, and we had to gut the place. And so even though I was still doing sound and music for all these big games for X-Men and Spider-Man and other titles, I was also directing all the celebrities and all the actors and the talent. And so that kind of pushed me more, even though we were rebuilding the studios, it just pushed me more onto the performance side of things. And so I took a lot of that music training, and as a director, I actually tend to direct more musically. My wife, who's also a director, she tends to direct a little bit more emotionally. She'll talk about, getting an actor with an emotional inspiration. And for me, I'll use that as well as sort of the context of a scene, but I'll also, when it comes to game performance, we'll also use a lot of musical training to be able to, in terms of, speeding up a take or flattening out a read, or teaching actors, especially in video games, how to use their technical acting skills to be able to do that. And so a lot of that music training has helped us with facial capture and motion capture, and doing a lot of stunts and timing, and a lot of the performances that you hear in these games. You need a lot of music training and really develop your ear. So now I've become much more of a performance director in directing, and that's why moving into motion pictures was kind of a natural progression than staying with music. And I'm in the middle of actually rebuilding our music rig. After the past 10 years, we're rebuilding our music studios. And last year I scored The Walking Dead and Mortal Kombat games. I did songs for those titles, just as kind of the first time going to be my toe back into doing some game scores. There's been a ton of interest in us going back outing and tour and go back as, pull the band back together, get the guys from Contagion back together, and do a couple of US and North American and European tours. But I'm working so much now and directing that I kind of want to, it's interesting, because when your hobby becomes your career, it's kind of hard to choose, because it's like you love what you do, and it's not like, you're doing it because of the money. You're doing it just because you love to do it. But there's just not enough hours in the day to do everything that you want to do. So it's a kind of a balance now between, what I want to go back to and doing music, and then directing, where we're at right now with the new films.
So back in 2016, actually the first year that we did my festival in Roswell.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Keith came out, and we did a red carpet premiere of the Phoenix incident, not the Roswell incident, Mike.
Dude, I had a brain fart. It happens, bro. Sorry.
Anyways, it was super cool, but he told me the story that I'll never get over about a horse prop. Could you go ahead and tell everybody that, Keith?
About the prop that we had on the film?
On the trailer? The one on the trailer, you were stuck in traffic.
The one where, when we had to move it at the film premiere, which story is when we shut down traffic?
The horse.
Yeah. Well, so in the film, there's a scene where, and there's only pictures of it in the movie. There's actually an extended part for the viral campaign, but we built a full-size eviscerated horse that was sort of taken out, we presume, by the aliens. And real horse skull. And then the guys from, it wasn't K&B, I'm trying to remember the name of the visual effects team that did it, the special effects team, but it was a full-size horse. We've had it in storage for the past several years. And so when the film was first premiering at the AFM, for the American Film Market, we did this like special premiere for all the buyers for all over the world. And we had sort of a museum set up with stills and artifacts from the movie and other things, just to make it really realistic before we did the screening. And we had to bring in this full-size horse to be able to do it. We had this whole plastic room that was all lit up. And so we had to load this truck with this giant horse and bring it in to Santa Monica, where this film festival was. And these guys were bringing it from the truck in, and it completely shut down traffic because everyone thought we had this like crazy eviscerated horse that we're bringing in, and everyone thought it was some kind of crime scene or whatever. And it just stopped traffic for about 20, 30 minutes while we got this thing in. And then people were looking in, trying to figure out why we have a dead horse in this building. So we set it up as a crime scene, and we had lights on it, and it was quite the sight.
Yeah,
Sounds intense. What's your, so do you find the UFO UAP topic interesting from like on a creative level too, like just as like kind of thought experiment stuff? Like how do you perceive the UFO UAP topic?
I mean, if you just think about like our universe and the number of planets and solar systems and, you know, galaxies that are there, the percentage of them that can contain and support life, it's just staggering. It's just it would be so naive for us to think that we're so special, that we're the only planet in the entire universe that could support life. And so I've always kind of felt that, like, you know, even though we might be at a great distance and not be able to visually see other civilizations or have experienced them directly, it's impossible to think that we're alone. It just doesn't, it wouldn't make sense. But I think that what's interesting is that there's been so much mythology and disinformation and other things that have been sort of combined in our society over thousands of years that have misinterpreted things, both from the UAP and UFO side, from the religious side, from the metaphysical side. There's so many different things that people have misconceived or construed or interpreted differently that, you know, even right now, things that happen in the news, we can't even always get a clear story of what's going on. So for things that could have happened, you know, sightings, you know, 50 years ago, 75 years ago in Roswell, or things that happened thousands of years ago in the Middle East, it's like, it's so open to interpretation that without that tangible smoking gun, without that footage, like what we're starting to see coming out of the Pentagon and other things, that it's hard for the mass population to really believe it and embrace it. And so I think that that's why it's always been pushed aside as conspiracy theories or something that's been on more of the extreme fringes of things, because people who have seen things and have experienced things, they just want answers. And it's not that they're conspiracy theorists or they're trying to be disruptive. It's just they're trying to get answers to what they've seen. And when I was making this movie, and I grew up in Arizona seeing things in the sky all the time, and there's tons of military activity there. You've got Davis-Monthan Air Force Base and Luke Air Force Base, and a whole bunch of activity from Fort Huachuca, and definitely doing experimental technologies and other things. So you're seeing things like crazy that you don't understand, but there's something much farther beyond that is going on. And when there's so many people in the military who are seeing things and civilians who are seeing it, it feels like, you know, there's a bigger conspiracy to cover it up, to keep people from seeing that. And I think that drives people like myself to want to get more answers and use whatever mediums, kind of like we were talking about before, like graphic novels or other things. Use whatever you can to get people talking about it, because it doesn't make sense why we would be so isolated and so cut off with the type of military aircraft and telescopes and viewing power that we have to see there, that there's got to be some evidence of something that can be shared. And if the governments or other people are scared that of mass hysteria, or we give up on religion, or whatever the reasons would be, it doesn't make sense. And so I feel that, like, as a filmmaker, I have an opportunity to sort of allow people to explore these topics, fictionally or non-fictionally, to just get them talking about it, to try to drive change. And so one of the things that we really did was we started this campaign called Disclose Now. And that was really our sort of our secret safe word that we were telling the UFO community, that when we were doing this viral campaign for the film, that even though we were creating all this fictional material, that we were, you know, trying to let them discern that from what's real. We didn't want them to feel that we were just trying to punk the, you know, the audience with all this disinformation, that was there. We were trying to tell our narrative by inspiring them to find something that ended up going in and having people do research. And that was actually the real big positive change that the movie did. So it was 20 million people following this thing. They actually did look up the actual events and started doing a lot of research. And so when we were able to come out and publicly talk about what we were doing, I think that really served to help a lot of education and dispelling a lot of the disinformation that was there. And so, we had John Greenwald and Ruben Langdon and Lynn Katai and the guys from MUFON. And then obviously we had Nick Pope and Lee Spiegel and Alejandro Rojas and Stanton all talking about it, right? And talking about what we did and using this as a way to talk about, the change that needs to be happening. And you see people like Tom and other people starting to, really get involved in getting this information out to the masses. And so it doesn't become some kind of weird, obscure conspiracy, topic or conversation. It actually becomes mainstream. And I think you're starting to feel that most people now, whether publicly or privately, they believe that we're not alone, right? It's just the question is how we've seen it, what we've experienced. That's subjective. And I think that there's a lot of mythology and other things from Hollywood and other things that have been mixed into it. So that's why everyone has a different interpretation of, what that contact might look like. But I really feel that, with everything that's happened, especially over the past 5 to 10 years, that people are really starting to change their outlook on UAPs and UFOs and really what that means for us.
Yeah, you hit on something towards the end there that I wanted to ask you about. People getting their perception from media. How do we keep the integrity of actual good research and philosophy and things that will push science, things that'll push this subject forward? Because it seems like, obviously, no offense, but bullshit sells, and you see a lot of that out there now, people selling crap, whether it be online or whatever, like crazy stuff that's not based in what we know of reality. Like, how do we maintain that credibility? Because it does seem like people do want to gravitate towards the more fantastical elements of these topics, but I feel like people that are making content do have a duty to do their due diligence and make sure it's like quality and like I said, steeped in actual metaphysics and reality and things like that.
Well, I think the big problem is that if you think about everything from Star Wars to Star Trek, I mean, everything deals with aliens and extraterrestrial life. I mean, it's not unique to any aspect of our culture in any way, shape, or form. People interpret angels as extraterrestrial. There's so many different interpretations with whatever kind of mythology you believe in. So there is no right or wrong in terms of how you view it. The problem is discerning the research and what's actually happening in terms of the science of what's happening versus how we interpret what that is. If it's coming from, a physical space, a dimensional space, there's so many different ways to interpret that. And at this point, the science, we don't have a definitive, unified acceptance of what's happening. And as a result of that, the only thing you can do is sort of inspire and educate, right? Because as a scientist, if you don't have the proof that you need and you don't have the validation through the community, then it's not going to be accepted. As a filmmaker or as a creative person, it's easier to do something, to scare people with aliens or to inspire them with a science fiction story or tell them to get them to believe and sway them to be open and thinking about the possibility, as opposed to just rejecting it and not being able to support that vision until that smoking gun is produced. And so I think that what's interesting, there's a lot of great people who are doing a lot of great research, and there's so many people who have been contributing and really being part of that. And you're seeing that in the UFO and the UAP community. But I think that everyone has to contribute in their own way. And even the filmmakers, Ridley Scott, when he did Alien, that was one of the most terrifying visions of an extraterrestrial alien I think there ever was for me growing up as a kid. It scared, the pants off of me, and very realistic. That movie still holds up right now. And, and why not? Right. Because it inspired me to get involved and be able to research and do other things. And so I think that it's more important that you have people who have an open mind and a discussion and constantly are looking to grow and seek the truth than there is people arguing that their version of the truth is better than the other person's vision, because that's what we've seen with religion over the past several thousand years. And, we've had entire civilizations wiped out because one person's philosophy is different than the other. And even if they're based on the same, but it's a different vision of that. And so I think that, it's important that as we're all starting to realize that we aren't alone and there are things going on, that we have an open mind to it and how that, is perceived. And they don't have to be angry, disgusting, vicious aliens that are attack dogs that are killing guys in the desert. And it doesn't have to be peaceful, angels that are coming down and whispering secrets into people's ears. I mean, there's so many different interpretations of what this could be.
I like to think of them as Mac from Mac and Me, if possible.
Or Alf.
Yeah, Alf eating cats out there.
Right.
But I guess my point was actually, and it's a weird dichotomy, because I do think that sci-fi is an amazing tool to think about what we could do for discovery and science in the future. However, I do think like things like Ancient Aliens, and while it's entertaining and we get to see these cool megalithic structures and stuff like that, it's clear that, humans built all that stuff. There's not aliens coming down doing that, in my opinion, but I think it's an educated opinion based on Toby's hands off. But and it's no knock on that. Like I said, I think that, it's things like that, though. I think it, like I said, it's a weird dichotomy. Science fiction, awesome, propels us. But if we're talking about reality right now and like what we know and don't know, I think that that's what I was talking about, more of like the documentary style or TV show style stuff. So.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of amazing stuff that's out there, and the footage that's there, and a lot of the filmmakers that have been building, amazing stories and research on that, I think is super powerful. And there's a bigger platform for it now. I think more and more people are consuming that and open to watching documentaries. It's not as fringe as it was even 10 years ago.
Have you seen James Fox's Moment of Contact?
I haven't. I know about it, and I know a lot of people who are involved, but I've heard it's phenomenal.
Okay, I was just curious because I know he said there's allegedly a 30-second clip, a video of the actual being that they're working on getting released. What do you think people's reaction to that would be, other than it's CGI?
He told me that in person at the Congress, actually. I think, when I was sitting with Micah Hanks and Chrissy Newton, he sat down beside us, and before he tweeted all that, yeah, he told me that.
If that can be validated, that's a game changer, right?
But I think you'll always have people that won't believe, no matter what. They could have a complete chain of custody, and someone's still going to say, "Oh, that's the government," or it's CGI, it's a puppet.
We have so much distrust in our society right now on all sides of everything, from politics to religion to this. So it's going to be hard for us to have a lot of progress right now with everything that's going on in the world, because where everyone is so far apart on so many different things that it makes it a challenge to really make progress when everyone's kind of sort of undermining. You come up with something and the government comes out with it, and then we're like, well, we don't trust the government. It's like, well, if you don't trust the government, then who can you trust, right? And rightfully so. The government has been involved in a lot of cover-ups and other things, and a lot of stuff that happened in the Phoenix Lights and the military cover-ups that went on. That was really the basis of what our movie was. And it wasn't just that. It's after our film was really interesting too, because one of the pilots from the A-10 from Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, just within weeks of the Phoenix Lights, he actually broke out of formation and flew his jet all the way to the Colorado border and slammed his jet into the side of a mountain with 4 intact bombs. And the military couldn't recover his plane for about 2 weeks, and had no idea, and he was potentially one of the pilots that may have been involved in the Phoenix Lights and the flare drop. And then within a month or two, his training officer, the only female pilot in the A-10 fleet, she also died in a mysterious training accident. And there was all sort of this controversy that they may have been involved in what happened in the cover-up that was going on with the Phoenix Lights out in the in the mountains there, in the Australian mountains. So we always have this inherent distrust of the people who are around us, in government and other things, because they're not sharing all the information that's there. And so it puts a lot of the onus on us as filmmakers or as documentarians or as researchers or scientists to kind of go out and get that information out there and then get that accepted so people can actually get the real truth.
Very interesting. Is the A-10, is that the Warthog?
Yeah, that's the Warthogs. Yeah, they're based out of Davis.
I learned that from Call of Duty. All right.
Shane refueled them, I'm sure.
I have many times.
Those are loud, right? I mean, in the game,
There's
loud.
Actually, I'll tell you a story. So, one of my favorite things about an A-10, when you're when I was in the Middle East, if you're an enemy, you were scared shitless when you heard him coming, because you heard him coming. If you were friendly, you were so happy because you heard him coming, because you can hear him. Oh man, they're coming low. People scatter because they will tear some stuff up. So yeah.
Yeah, they fly low and slow. I mean, they're tank killers, and the guns that they have in the nose of those things are so powerful that they can only fire in small bursts, because those things will actually rip the nose right out of the Warthog. They're so powerful. But they're like flying in like a lead like tank, or a bathtub, right? It's just like this whole thing that's just kind of coming in low and slow, and they can take direct hits from a tank on the battlefield. So
yeah,
Can they let you near one, Shane?
The gun's so powerful that when it fires in those bursts, it actually is doing the opposite of the propulsion in the back, and it's decreasing because it's hitting like that. As well as I know for a fact that there's been one Warthog that was wing was completely destroyed and gone, and it flew home and landed safely without a wing.
Those are badass. Yeah.
I can attest they are badass. I worked many people over on Nuketown on Black Ops.
I gassed up a couple. They're cool. They're old. I know they're going to be replacing them soon with something, probably a UFO.
I got one.
Super
It's
cool.
wrecked, but I've got it. So, Keith, when are you going to come back to Roswell?
We gotta plan that. That's the next thing, right? We gotta go do the next festival, and we're gonna be re-releasing the movie. We've got about, I think, 8 or 10 festivals that are gonna be showing the film this year, and we have a new cut of the film. We may be doing like an extended cut or some of the extra footage that's there, and I really wanted to cut down some of the shaky footage that was in the movie. As a first-time filmmaker, you're like, oh, sure, we're going to run out in the desert with a red camera. And it's like, oh, my God. So it's nice. We're going to be kind of doing a little bit of an edit on the film to be able to make some of that stuff a little bit less vomit-inducing. But it was great. It was great. For my first film, just to kind of learn how to make a movie, we shot the thing in 11 days and, just over $1 million. So, but it really opened up my chance to be able to direct other motion pictures. So now we're in the middle of getting ready for doing 3 new motion pictures and obviously the new games that we're doing. So for me, it was a great experience just to kind of go through that process of making the film and be able to do that. And so going out to Roswell and be able to do the festival there and be able to show that with the audiences and interact with people who, I think on one side were moviegoers, the other side were people that, were experiencers or people who, really researchers, and other people wanted to do it. It was a great experience. It was great to be right in the middle of all of that and not be.
Do you remember we were standing in the theater and that elderly couple walked out because your movie was too scary?
Yeah, we got quite a bit of that. Some people don't like the profanity and other things that were there, and most of the actors in that movie, it was interesting. There's a lot of the character work was really based on the actors that I had been working with on all those video games. So Troy Baker is, the main character from The Last of Us. You got Liam O'Brien and Travis Willingham from Critical Role, and their show right now is huge. And you have Yuri Lowenthal, who's Spider-Man in the new Spider-Man games. So a really amazing cast that's there. Even Matt Mercer, who's from Critical Role, and his career is huge. He's some of the pilot voices there because we had done all this stuff on Call of Duty together. And Brian Bloom, who's also on the Call of Duty team over at Infinity Ward. Just great actors and great people to work with. So as a filmmaker, getting to work with all this amazing talent and getting to play in this space on a topic that I wanted to explore was just, a great first time experience.
Can I tell you that The Last of Us is probably one of my favorite games of all time? I do like to play single players, but I will say that that's probably the only game when it finished and it was over, I was super sad that I had finished the game and I wouldn't be able to experience that whole thing, for the
Yeah.
first time. The only
Yeah.
time I've ever felt that where I was like, oh man, this was amazing. And so, yeah, that was an amazing game. I remember the time because it was so good. I remember exactly when it happened. It's imprinted right in my head because that feeling was like, I'll never experience that again.
Yeah. The fact that narratives in video games have gotten so good and so emotionally powerful like that it's like it's surpassed motion pictures, right? The game industry is bigger than film and television and music combined. And the fact that you're not just watching a half-hour TV show or an hour and a half movie, but you're actually experiencing something that goes on for 20, 30, 40 hours of gameplay. That's pretty cool. And to have performances and something that really engages you to the point that you really just love being in that world, that really speaks to the fact that our society has really changed a lot. It's not just going to see a movie now on the weekend. It's, video games are a part of our lives.
I'll say that I just realized too, that's the last game I played before I got really sick. And the whole story anyway, doesn't matter. And so much so, I loved it so much so that I don't watch TV shows, movies. I read a lot, but HBO's doing that series, and I keep watching the trailer, and that's all I think about was like, oh, I hope this does does it some justice, because after playing the game, yeah, those narratives are, I mean, if they're done right, I'm telling you, it feels like you're right there, and you're sad, and you're just like, what happened? You shouldn't. It's just like a song. When they get that one of those songs that pulls with those heartstrings. That game did that to me, and I'd never felt that in a game before.
And what's kind of interesting now is that most of the actors who were in Phoenix Incident weren't really known at the time, right? They had been working in games and doing a lot of stuff, but they weren't really named talent. And Last of Us came out after the film, and all these games kind of broke after the movie. And so now that you see these guys on Critical Role and you see Last of Us and other things, like now these actors are pretty mainstream actors, and they're very well known and respected. So a lot of people are rediscovering Phoenix Incident and surprised to see all these actors together in the movie and finding their favorite video game actors.
How come we don't? Can we get some sort of multiplayer alien game? Some sort of. I feel like there's not that many cool alien games out there, right?
There's a few out there. Even Call of Duty actually had some DLCs for, I think it was for Ghosts or Modern Warfare 3. There was like some.
Yeah, there was one. Yeah. I know what you're talking about. I think zombies have had some stuff too.
Right. So yeah,
Killer
we do need
coming.
Right.
No, but I would like to see some sort of multiplayer game like that. I saw you worked on Titanfall too. Actually, I thought that was when that first came out for one. I really enjoyed that game a lot.
Yeah, that was the original team from Modern Warfare 2, and then they left and started Respawn.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm loving the new game too. Good stuff. So you said you're working on something now with Wesley.
Yeah, got a new book called The Exiled, and myself, Wesley Snipes, and Adam Lawson, and Skivo is doing the artwork on it, and really cool story. We did a Kickstarter earlier in the year, and it just blew up and exploded. Did really, really well. We ended up teaming up with the guys from Whatnot, and Whatnot is going to be publishing the graphic novel under their new Whatnot publishing umbrella. And that's pretty exciting. If you guys haven't seen Whatnot, that's kind of a game changer, I think, in the industry for what's going on with collectibles and comic books and other things. And so that book, both the Kickstarter and the first issue are coming out in January. I think pre-sales wrap up in about a week or so, and it's probably one of the biggest pre-sales they've ever seen on previews and what's going on with comics right now. So we're super excited to have this book come out because the reveal is awesome. Just in the initial preview, it's about this sort of like this hard-boiled detective that's sort of on the chase of the serial killer, but the killer is sort of gruesomely taking on his victims by removing their spines. And it seems like some kind of horror 7 kind of murder scary thing. But the way he's doing it is he's using these tools from some kind of ancient artifact that's over 5,000 years old. And so there's some really weird tie-in with this. And so issue 2 is going to be the big reveal of who this killer is and what he's doing. But a lot of fans who know what we've done, with Phoenix and other things, I think will be pleasantly surprised because it's kind of a nice nod to what's actually happening. And the whole pitch of what we did for this story is about to come out in issue 2. So so it's called The Exiled, and it'll start off as a comic book, graphic novel, and then hopefully we'll get to make that into a motion picture and a series as well.
Should bring Wesley on with you next time.
Yeah, he's great.
I'm a huge
Wes
fan of his too.
I had started to work with him back when I first started in the game industry on Demolition Man. That was one of the first games I did at Virgin, and then Wes had actually seen one of my other graphic novels, Infex, and had reached out and reconnected, and we became friends and started working on some projects together. And then when we decided to do this, we were like, you know what? Why don't we team up and put this together? And it's been awesome. And he's just a great partner in all this stuff.
Oh, you look scared, Mike.
No, I had my mute button on by accident.
Nice one, Mike.
No, I'm looking forward to all these projects. I'm not a big comic book guy, but I know Shane and Toby are. I respect it. I always tell the story when I was younger. My cousin and we would go to the card shop, and I would get, hockey cards and baseball cards and collect cards, and he would get all the comic book stuff, and kind of did it that way. So I was more of a card nerd.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people had seen comic books predominantly as superhero stories, and while that's obviously a great platform for that, I think that comics and graphic novels have really had the opportunity to evolve over the past 15, 20 years into so many other types of stories, which has been great. And as a visual medium, sometimes as an author, it's a really just great way to express an idea. You try to explain it in a novel, and it's like, it's cool, but you just don't have the ability to do it without the visuals. So comics have really kind of bridged that gap for a lot of us to be able to do that.
Yeah, be sure you check out Estimate of the Situation, Keith. It's a project going on now, and it's actually based on, like UFO cover-up and stuff. It's pretty phenomenal. I think you'd like it.
That's comic
awesome.
book I was showing you earlier. Estimate. He does a whole UFO thing, just telling the story of different experiencers or different, I guess you would say, events, incidents, and he's put it in comic book form, just like you with the Phoenix incident, kind of telling a story in a way that brings people in so they can kind of see, it's pretty damn cool.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's such a great just a great way to get people to start talking about it. Just same thing like we did with our film and with these other platforms, having something that people can just find their own way and interact with it is a great way to get excited about learning about it.
So like, what's the goal with like the Exiled stuff? Is it just to keep it, as a comic book, or kind of like a Walking Dead thing where you maybe like produce it or, turn it into some sort of TV production or short series or something like that?
I mean, the story itself lends itself perfectly to do either a movie or a TV show. And with Wes and his background, I think he very much would love to see it as a motion picture as well. It could easily make a television show, and there's been a lot of great television recently over the past 5-10 years. TV has really gotten very, very, very good. So I think we're open to both, and we're getting a lot of calls right now just based on the success of the Kickstarter and now what people are seeing on the pre-sales of the book, that a lot of the studios are paying attention to that. So I think our goal is very much so to get to see this realized as a movie or a TV show. So that's probably our next big thing once the book comes out. And there's six episodes, I think 6 chapters that'll be coming out. So over the next half year. So once that kind of makes its kind of arc, then I think you'll see a lot of movement for us on the movie side.
Very cool. Look forward to that for sure. I kept Walking Dead lost me towards the end, but early on, I really loved The Walking Dead, like the first like 3 or 4 seasons. But yeah, I mean, I think if you can take something that's already an art, or graphic novel or comic book or whatever, and do it justice, I think that those come out really well. But I mean, there's not that many adaptations that, that people always get pissed off at adaptations. But I think if you're doing both, if you're either connected to the comic book already or into that world, I think you probably respect it and understand it a little bit more than, let's say, somebody that's just trying to produce a show or a movie or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's you have to have that creative sort of continuity between the creators who are working on both mediums, so they understand, obviously each medium requires people who are experienced in making that medium work, but they also have to understand what makes it work in another one. And so seeing that with Walking Dead and other things, it started off obviously as a very successful series, and then to be able to turn it into a television series and seeing that growth of the series from where Frank Darabont started it and where it's gone now with Kirkland is it's important that you have that continuity.
Absolutely. Well, anything else, Toby or Shane? Any other questions before we wrap it up here?
No, I just want to thank Keith for coming on. And like I said, hopefully we get you back in Roswell. I'd love to do it again. It was a great time. We actually had in the office one of the alien eggs that hatched. So, it was kind of funny. But yeah, Keith is fantastic. His wife, his kids, they're all just so nice. Some of the nicest people you could ever meet. And happy for all the success you're having.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. We're just, big kids having fun. It's like, I think that so many people think that you have to do something in life, and there's I don't know, there's an expectation that you've got to do things. And I think at a young age, I just said, I just want to just be happy and do things that I'm inspired to do, and just try to find a career to focus on doing those things. And I think that's really the secret to it, is people want to work with people who are excited to do what they do. You don't want to go to a doctor who's just like, oh, okay, I'll just treat you with whatever's going on. Like, you want someone who's going to be like, hey, we're going to find out what's going on with you, and we're going to get to the bottom of this. And, and that's really what you want. And so when you're creatively working with someone, you want someone who's doing it because they're inspired to do it and they're excited about it. They're not just doing it because of the money or whatever. If you're in this business for the money, there's a lot of other careers that you can pursue to make better money than that. But for people who really like creating and doing stuff, it's just it's a great space to be.
I mean, that's wise words right there, and I agree. I think anything you can put your passion into definitely, gets recognized for that. And it's very tough to be original and creative, and I talk about this a lot on my podcast, but to have an original idea, or mostly original idea, I mean, everything's influenced from something, right? But to get to that point where you're constantly coming up with like new ideas, it's people recognize that, and I think that we need more of that in this world, as opposed to making a recreation of a recreation, or going back, what was popular in the 80s, let's remake that movie, or let's like come up with a new movie. Like I would love to see more new stuff out there. So I appreciate what you're doing and bringing that creative element to it, because I cannot stand keep watching stuff that I watched when I was a kid and just shittier remakes of them. So but I really appreciate it, and I love all the stuff you've done, and I loved the Phoenix incident, not the Roswell incident. I apologize
you
for
can
my
love the Roswell incident too.
I apologize for my brain fart, everybody. But yeah, so everybody, please go check out the Phoenix incident. It's on Toby. You can watch it. It's a free downloading stream platform that you can go download right now and watch the movie. And yeah, do you have anything else you want to plug, Keith?
No, I mean, we've got a lot of surprises coming out this year. You can always follow us at pcbproductions.com or pcb.cc. And that kind of has a lot of our projects that we're working on, especially our game projects. It's there. But yeah, a lot of surprises. Got a lot of neat games coming up. I think we've got about 30 new games that we're producing and directing this year. So you're going to see some fun stuff coming out that we're working on. And hopefully Exiled and our next movie projects will get announced soon, and then we'll have more to talk about.
Awesome, man. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, and this is a treat. We can talk UFOs and shop all day long, but I think that you offer real insight into how these movies, documentaries, the music, video games, all that kind of stuff gets made, and I think that's important too, to people see how the the food's made, if you will, or I don't even know how you would use that analogy. But I really appreciate it. And yeah, so everybody check out his website. I have the link down below. Again, please check out the Phoenix incident on Tubi. And if you want to support the Roswell UFO Symposium, all you have to do is click the Linktree link down below. We've got all of our social media stuff on there. If you're listening, please check out our YouTube channel and subscribe. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, please check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate it. And that's it. We'll have to have you back on in the future, Keith, and we really appreciate your time.
That'd be great. Thanks, guys. It was really nice to talk to you guys today, and we'll see you in a little bit.
Thank you for coming, Keith. And real quick, guys, I just want to shout out to Wounded Warrior, guys. Check them out. If you're watching, saved my life as usual. And I would also like to say, if you guys aren't on Twitter, you need to get on there. You're missing out on part of the conversation in some spaces we're going to be holding and are holding. So if you get a chance, Old Bet Symposium's my name on there. You got Mike Escape, and then you have RD Incident. So check it out. We're going to be holding spaces and doing this as well. So thank you.
All right, everybody. Stay safe out there. We love you. We will catch you next time. Peace.
See you soon. Take care.